All right, I'll call together this meeting of the Public Safety Committee. Mr. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Kennedy.
Here.
Vice Chairman Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman French.
Present.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Present.
Alderman Arnowitz.
Here.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Ingracia.
Present.
Chairwoman Young.
Present.
8 present. We have a quorum.
All right. We are here for a monthly update from the police about what's going on with the department and with public safety. We will adhere to the same rules that we had before, whereby people have 5 minutes to ask questions, because if we do that, then we'll come back around and you'll have another 5 minutes. If you are in a line of questioning and you would like to take all your time at one time, please let me know. And then we'll proceed if there is anyone from the general public that has questions. Or I think if there are public people here who want to make comments, that's fine, but I don't think we'll be entertaining questions between them and the police. Also, then, if there are people who are not on the committee, we will go by order of seniority, and if they would like to ask questions after the committee members. So with that, Chief,
Good morning.
what's going on in the past month?
Good morning, how are you? I'm going to pass out a copy of a PowerPoint presentation, and it's very similar to the PowerPoint presentation that you saw last month. Just for formatting purposes, this is typically the way that we do make our monthly crime report, just so you become familiar with it. This will be posted on our website later this week or early next week. Just kind of a little bit of operational, and you have enough? Yep, there you go. Kind of an operational understanding of the police department. We report our crime, our UCR crime, to the FBI through the Highway Patrol. We usually do that when we close out crime for the preceding month. As you can imagine, it takes a couple of days in some cases for officers to prepare reports. So we don't close out the month until typically about the 8th or the 9th of the following month. So this report, once it's finalized, will be posted on our website sometime around June 10th. The next one will be sometime around June 11th. That's just kind of how we do business. So I'll step you through this right now, and these are all the crimes that have been coded through yesterday up through the month of May. And so there may be one or two that are in the pipeline that haven't quite been completed yet, but this is, I would say, a 99% accurate portrayal of what's happened, and then in the next couple of days we'll finalize it. So the first slide, after the header slide, it talks about crime, all of the major Part 1 crimes. Murder, as you can see, I think in our last report we were plus murders around 14 or 15. We remain at that number again. We've seen an increase in homicides. The number one area that I've seen those increases in are related to lifestyle, whether substance abuse, drug issue, some conflict, personal conflict. I think it's also important to note that we've had at least 2 cases so far this year where children have murdered their parents in their homes. One on Easter Sunday, a young man killed his mother in the home. Another young man killed his father over money in his apartment. So those are, again, very difficult. No police intervention that I'm aware of could have interceded in those. We've also this year had at least 2 instances where caregivers responsible for children were held accountable for the death of their children, I believe a 2 and a 4-year-old. So again, two instances, yes. So again, I don't know of any intervention that could have gotten between a caregiver and their child that would have prevented that. Moving across the category, as you can see, all the categories are down. Aggravated assaults, and I won't talk about everyone unless you have a specific question, but I'll hit some of the high points. Aggravated assaults, if you recall, last month were up and up significantly. We've seen a decrease of 11 aggravated assaults year to date through the month of May. I contribute a lot of that to our focus strategies, hotspot policing, Wells Goodfellow neighborhood, Tower Grove South neighborhood, targeting individuals that we believe are responsible for retaliatory shootings, individuals when we do see violence, trying to get involved at a level that helps reduce the tension in those neighborhoods. So while aggravated assaults are down, there's still an area of tremendous concern for me. I think every opportunity we have to intervene and take illegal guns off the streets helps towards that. So that continues to be our number one focus, violent crime and specifically the aggravated assaults. Moving across the categories, robberies are down, burglaries, a tremendous decrease in burglaries, about 265 fewer incidences across the city through the first 5 months. Larcenies, again across the city, 785 fewer larcenies. And vehicle theft continues to be at historic lows that we haven't seen since almost the 50s. So that category is performing very well. So any questions about, and we'll continue to step through the slides, but as I go, I just wanted to offer an opportunity to ask any questions about this level, and you can certainly come back to it if you have any questions. The next slide talks about crime overall in the city. As you can see, the bar on the far right represents total crime. That's a combination of person crime and property crime. We've had 824 fewer crimes in the city of St. Louis through May. That's a 14.8% decrease compared to the previous year. Property crime, which is the middle bar, a 16.4% decrease. That's 741 fewer crimes. And then the person crime category, almost 8% decrease, 83 fewer crimes in that person category. Moving to the next slide. I always think it's important to have context. Year-to-year comparisons are good, but just like everything else, the unemployment rate, inflation, crime fluctuates up and down. And so going back to 2006, which 2006, and the reason we picked 2006, in the last 10 years, it was the highest crime year. So going from, in the last 10 years, the peak was 2006. We've seen a 51% decrease in the city of St. Louis for crime since 2006. A 43.8% decrease in person crime, and property crime is down 52.6%. So we continue to see those crimes, again, from the peak years, trending in a positive and in the right direction. As you know, the next slide, as you know, the city's, although we did redistrict and reduce from 9 to 6 districts, we kept the 3 area station concept. And so we have a North Patrol, a South Patrol, and a Central Patrol. This shows the levels of decrease across each of the areas. As you can see, every district, every area in every category is showing some progress, some reduction. Homicides, as we look back historically, this is going back to 2009, and again, it's just a 6-year snapshot of where the homicides have been occurring. Again, as I said earlier, homicides are one of the most difficult to intervene in, one of the most difficult to assess. Where we see homicides in South Patrol, the bottom bar, remain relatively consistent. Central Patrol, relatively consistent, a slight uptick compared to last year. And North Patrol, we've seen an increase in murders there. Again, I think it's perspective and it's important to have context. So the next slide is in mine it's blue, but the more consistent line is the 5-year average of homicides. The line that goes up and down over that is the 12 months, the current 12-month period. Compared to the 5-year average, there were 4 fewer murders in May than there were for the 5-year average. Again, it's context to understand that crime goes up and down. Murders especially do fluctuate. So this shows you that some months we're below the 5-year average, some months we are above. What I would say about that is when we see a spike in an area, we look at the aggravated assaults, we look if there are any precursors, any interventions that we can do. I would say that this is probably one of the key indicators to us moving into the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood with hotspot policing. We saw an increase in murders in that neighborhood and we wanted to have an intervention. Our intervention, again, over a 10-day period in the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood, almost 90 arrests and nearly 20 guns taken off the street in again, one of the city's 79 neighborhoods. The next slide is robberies. Again, context, 5-year average compared to the last 12 months. 88 fewer robberies in May than the 5-year average. You'll see that continues. Aggravated assaults, although we've seen a spike compared to last year in the 5-year average, 67 fewer aggravated assaults in May. Citywide burglaries, 176 fewer burglaries compared to the 5-year trend in May. Larcenies is the next category. 281 fewer larcenies, and vehicle theft, 138 fewer. And so that, I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what was the true picture of crime in the city of St. Louis. While our friends in the media like to portray the story of the day, the consistent story that remains is that crime is moving in a positive direction. We are reducing crime. We do see spikes in some areas. When we do see spikes in those areas, we develop strategies based on the data to create interventions that will hopefully disrupt that cycle. Whether it's violence, whether it's robberies or burglaries, when we examine the data, we put officers and resources into the areas that are seeing those increases. I think I always have to say that our number one concern and our number one priority is always violence. I would like to have a month where we have no crime in the city of St. Louis. Realistically, you don't go from where we are to zero overnight. I think you have to make incremental progress, and I think we consistently do that. Some months we see spikes or blips, we address them, but consistently over the last 8 years, crime has been moving in a downward trend. So I'd be happy to talk about anything that you have, any questions you have about this, or anything that's going on in the city, actually.
Okay, Alderman Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the homicides, I know you said they're difficult to deal with. Have they changed in the nature of them over the past several years?
And the Assistant Chief, Al Atkins, is here. And the Homicide Division reports to the Assistant Chief. And so, as you remember, he made a presentation last year. I think he's probably best to answer that, and I'll come back after it.
Unfortunately not. They have not changed. And what you see is from last month, if you remember, the age ranges are adults. A lot of folks think that it's children that are doing these things, and it's adults 21 to 29 years of age. And it goes up from there to the 30s and the 40s and then 50s, and then it comes back down to 17 and 19-year-olds. So we can see from the suspects that have been arrested, we can see from the toxicology of the victims that there is some drug use or alcohol. We can see also that from family members that there's either poor education, they haven't completed upper level schooling. Many of them have not completed high school. So these factors all play a part in it. And it comes to conflict resolution, and it comes to poor communication skills, the majority of the motives for these incidents.
Do they also fall within an economic bracket, typically?
Unfortunately, we haven't begun to track that, but that is a good idea.
That's all.
Okay.
I just kind of, as a comment to when we're on homicides for a moment, I think it's important that we stress that homicides are a difficult case to make through the circuit attorney's office. We have a great relationship with the circuit attorney, but ultimately it comes down to cooperation and assistance of witnesses, people that have knowledge. And in the last 2 months or so, and I think I mentioned it when we were here, we've had several cases where we've made arrests, but prosecution has not been able to move forward because witnesses, people that have very pertinent information to the case haven't come forward. So we do clear a little over half of these cases, but prosecution is dependent on witnesses, and that's difficult sometimes.
Thank you.
Alderman Schmidt?
Thank you. First of all, thank you. So I appreciate very much on the aggravated assaults because I had always been told that this was sort of the precursor, and you confirmed that. We've had some interesting things recently. I know that the police are doing a great job because they're out there. And I keep getting calls from people saying, I see the police out there. I think sometimes, and communication does a great job, but I'm not sure that the connection is always there. Let me tell you what I mean on a couple of things. One is somebody called me about a memorial that was taking place on a block for somebody who had died in the Minnow mob like 2 years ago. And so the police came by, but they didn't do anything really about it. And I know intelligence has to get involved in that, and sometimes it's a process. But that can be, because this person said, they said somebody's going to die tonight, or somebody's going to get, I can't remember exactly, but I related that information. So that's sometimes where those kind of homicides come from. The other one, and I know that you guys work on this, but sometimes, at least this was the case last year, when people would call in to 911 or 231-1212, unfortunately, we can't train all of our constituents. So they'll just say, well, there's kids playing in the street, and that sounds pretty innocuous. But in some areas, it's well known that the kids start playing in the street. There's an errant ball or something that hits somebody's car. People are ready to fight. Then more people are ready to fight, and it becomes a virtual riot. So, I mean, some of this is just, we'll continue to try to train, and I know you guys go out and try to train through the various outreach, police meetings and so forth, but communication won't put that as a highest priority, I understand that, but it's still sort of an issue to try to address as sort of a precursor to some of this. And the last one is on our drug houses. And I did send something over to you about that, and I know that the police department's been very good about trying to get constituents to other resources like 241 cops and trying to get them to the area stations and so forth, but one of the issues is that sometimes these drug houses also have gambling going on, and frequently that's where we get some of our homicides, and I think you alluded to that earlier. So it would be actually helpful to us if we had that sort of computer trail, that if there's a particular address where people are calling in for drugs, and then they call the NSO or they call the alderman or whatever, we can look to see how many calls for service there are with the police department, and we can try to address it during a nuisance process as well. Dr. Purnell, who was instrumental in that study on the For the Sake of All, indicated that zip code can be just as important, if not more important, than genetic code, mostly because of sort of norms that are created and so forth in the community. And so sometimes, and you know this well, you've already talked about the broken window syndrome and all that, but we're trying to get it at the low end so that we retain our good people who want that good quality of life and attract more good people who want that good quality of life, so that we ultimately don't have as many homicides, and police can take a break now and then. So that's all.
And if I can just
Sure.
parse through, I think there were three things there. The first one, you talked about the intelligence that we could gather at, I think you talked about a memorial service. We're working on refining it. Information, you gave me information. There was a memorial service with people that may be associated with the mailbox. What we have to do is get it to intelligence, and really the difference between information and intelligence is something actionable. So we need to be able to just, a group coming together as a memorial service, many times that happens for legitimate purposes and legitimate reasons, that somebody is coming to remember a family member or a significant person in the neighborhood. So we do focus on that. We can always do better. We can always do more. But cooking that down to something that's actionable. Johnny shows up with a gun or something like that, or Johnny's coming, he's the one that's going to do it. We have to bake that down. So we do spend a lot of time. I think our intelligence function now, our intelligence unit is what we call it, it really works hard. We've centralized the gang function back into the intelligence unit from the area stations to try and be able to share that information across not only geographic boundaries, but units within the side of the police department, up and down. So I still continue to call us, because the more information that we have, the better informed, the better we're able to respond. Kids playing in the street is a tough call for us, and I'm just being honest, and it is, because while certainly that is something that could escalate. Until it escalates, we go and Mrs. Smith comes out and says, well, that's my grandson, he's just playing kickball, he's just playing catch, he's just throwing a football around, why are you harassing him? So that's a very tough call for us, and I think that gets a little bit to parental involvement too, to make sure that children are. I'm going to tell you about two calls that I listen to. I've been riding around the districts a lot, and they just happen to be in the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood. I was riding around when we were in the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood, and it really kind of makes a statement about where some portion of society is, or what people think that the role of the police department is. So both happened between 7 and 7:30, one day, another the next. A call that a grandfather called and said his 15-year-old grandson was being disrespectful and wouldn't go to school and wanted the police to come and take him to school. So at what point, I actually felt sorry for the officers that would get that call, because how do officers become family members? They walk into a situation with no history, no understanding of it, except that the family thinks that 911 is their resort. That was on Thursday. On Friday, the call was a mother who was not even at home, said her 19-year-old and her 12-year-old, whatever the age were at home, and the 12-year-old was not listening to the 19-year-old and wouldn't go to school and wanted us to go help get the kid to school. Again, I feel sorry for the officers, because those are parental responsibilities, and those are, I don't know what to tell the officers to do in those situations. So it kind of comes back to the kids playing in the street. Really, until there's a law violation.
And that is a law violation. I was
It's
gonna
playing in the
mention
street.
that.
It is, and then if they are violating the law, I get that. But a lot of the calls are there young men standing on the corner, make them stop. And it really, I think we've created an expectation somewhere that the police department can solve a lot of social problems that we can't. We can do a lot, but there's a lot that we can't do. And then the last one, I think you talked about, the drug house, the gambling. And I could not be a stronger proponent of the problem properties. And I think John McLaughlin is probably the best person we could have in that position. And I do everything I can to support him. I think that we are looking at a new records management system is probably the best way to describe it, which will help us track those calls better. We're doing education with our officers internally that when they do get a call and there's no necessarily a police report that needs to be written, at least they put comments into the CAD call so that this will count against that and add up in the problem property process. So I think just as we do with the community call when you have a problem, we have an education piece that we're trying to do with our officers to push up their attention and responsiveness around that issue.
Yeah, because I'm in the meeting. I just wanted to point out that sometimes I'm not sure that the calls are even being registered at the outset, because people are being directed to call 241-COPS or 444-0100, which no longer is even the number for the 3rd District. So it's getting into the ethosphere.
And that's good feedback for me. The 241-COPS number does count in the problem property process.
No,
We keep those calls. And
well, but we've been told it has to be 231-1212 or 911 if it goes to 241-COPS. No one is getting that. If there's a way to get that, that would be great. But we're not
it should
getting
count in
that.
the process.
Yeah.
It should count. It just is a call for service. It should count because we do have follow-up on those.
Well, the city councilor hasn't been counting those.
Well,
Okay.
I'll talk to the new council. I agree. They should be if they're not.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Boyd?
Thank you. Good morning, Chief. Comment, question. First of all, I want to thank you and the police officers for the initiative, the hotspot policing in the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood. A lot of people that I talked to were very excited about the police being over there. It made them feel safer. It made them feel good about what was happening. It not only happened in Wells Goodfellow, but the whole experience actually came over to the Hamilton Heights neighborhood as well, since it's just right across the street, pretty much a bordering neighborhood. It also helped the neighborhood ownership model team. It got them more motivated to want to do more because of police presence. So I just want to make that comment to you that it is working, and I appreciate the program. And the other questions, then the question I have is this. Speaking of the hotspot policing, a lot of people are asking, how do you make a decision about what neighborhood you go into, when will you come back, into the neighborhood that you left. So I want you to talk about that. And the second is, you talked about earlier about you make the arrest, but oftentimes you have problems with witnesses coming in, and so you kind of lose. So I'm starting at 90, for example, with good arrests made. So what percentage of those arrests actually translate into charges being filed?
And so we'll talk with how do we make the decisions about hotspot policing, and then we'll talk about what percentage are. So we look at the data, and while we see spikes in crime, what concerns me is when we see kind of the level continue to elevate, go up and come down. An individual is in that neighborhood that's committing some crime. There's some situation that's rectified itself. But when things continue to move up and we don't see any downward trend. So I'm very data driven. So when we look at throughout the city, so right now we're still focused on hotspots. But instead of coming out and saying we're in the Tower Grove South neighborhood, we're in College College Hill, we're in Wells Goodfellow. We have 3 areas in North St. Louis that we're working right now. And we take our special operations and our mobile reserve and put them into those neighborhoods. And we're seeing what kind of impact we can have when we don't stand in a neighborhood, and see if we're able to have the same type of results. So wherever we see an increase in crime, that certainly isn't anecdotal and certainly isn't a one-time spike, that it consistently moves up. So there are 3 areas that we're working on right now with a hotspot approach, but a different tactic. And then for the prosecution, we can certainly help you track the prosecution. I will tell you, of those almost 90 arrests or so, several of them were for probation and parole violations, things that people were wanted for. So those, hopefully the courts will revoke the probation, revoke the parole, and give them an outcome that keeps the community and the neighborhood safe. But we can start to track those and look and see what we can do with those arrests.
Also, one other comment, I'm sorry. It's more so for the captains. What I found being helpful to the community when they come out and do the reports is if they can talk about how many crimes were solved. Like, let's say last month we talked about there were 4 burglaries. Well, it'd be nice the next time they come and say, and we actually made good arrests on 3 of them. It just kind of helps make people feel good. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderman French.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, in your report, I think you did this last time too, on the slide where you show total crime down by these large percentages, you get that percentage by measuring it against the peak year of 2006?
That slide is compared to last year. That slide, okay, let's see which one. Can you show me which one?
Yeah, property, you've got property, the page 2, top slide.
Is it the 3rd slide, that one?
No, it's the page 2,
Yeah.
top slide.
That one. That's 2006 compared to, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's not really a fair comparison. You measure against the highest recorded year of crime, right? That doesn't give an accurate picture of, wouldn't it be more accurate to maybe take an average over a 10-year period or a 5-year period instead of just measuring against our highest recorded crime year?
Well, actually, I've done both. And that's why I showed you the peak year, because in the last 10 years that was it. But if we looked at the individual crimes, I took a 5-year average to show you how we were comparing the 5-year average. We can parse the crime out in as many different ways as you and I can think about as in any alderman. I'm open to suggestions, so we can look at, if we went back to 1993, 94 in the peak crack wars, which we didn't, we're going to look significantly better than even going back to 2006. So we just picked some benchmark. So I think 2006, the biggest crime year in the last 10 years, we can do the math and step it down each year, and we do when we issue our report. We were down total crime 12% last year. I don't remember exactly.
At the end of the year?
Yeah.
It was, I think,
5%.
5.4.
The year before that, 12%. So we have on our website different variations of that report. And so as many different ways as we can think about parsing it out, we can. But I think that tells a good story about what's happening in the city of St. Louis.
Yeah, it tells a story. I mean, my suggestion would be just to take either a 5 or a 10-year average and then measure each year against the average. Other thing, down here on the, this 2 slides down, so it shows that as you divide it by North, Central, and South Patrol. So in this current year, we're at the highest level of homicides year to date in North Patrol in at least 6 years.
That's, yes, a correct statement.
What is the current closure rate for homicides?
40 to 50%, I believe is what it is.
About 40 or 50%. Now, and you guys consider a homicide closed when you make an arrest and refer it to the circuit attorney, not necessarily when someone is actually convicted.
Actually, the FBI definition, the UCR definition of closure is when you make an arrest or a case can be abated by death if the suspect dies. So yeah, those are closures and those are figured in there, and that's by the FBI definition.
So if you have about 40% of homicides in the city where an arrest is made, the actual number of folks who have been convicted for homicides would be far less than that.
But again, I don't know that number because that's the question for the circuit attorney.
Okay. All right. Aggravated assaults. Now, it's up to you guys to determine how you classify a crime as an aggravated assault or something less. Is that correct?
No, it's not. There are guidelines from the FBI about what an aggravated assault is classified. So an aggravated assault, basically, in simple terms, anyone that's shot or in a situation where they could have been shot. And I'll give you an example. Somebody fires shots into a house. There's an individual in the living room. The shot comes through the window in the living room. That is counted as an aggravated assault. So the person doesn't actually have to be shot, but they have to be in a situation where reasonably they could have been shot. Following that through, if a shot is fired into the living room of a house and 3 rooms in the back is the kitchen, that person may not be counted because they were never in fear of actually being shot because the round was not going to penetrate 6 walls. So anybody doesn't have to be shot by FBI definition, the UCR definition, doesn't have to be shot, but in a situation where they reasonably could have been shot.
Okay. So last month, I think you were here, or the last time you were here, I think I'd asked if you can start including on your reports the actual number of people who have been shot, which is similar to how New York City does it on their CompStat report. It actually shows citizens who are a number of people who were shot. Do you guys have that data?
And you sent me in an email that asked me to look at that. And we have looked at it, and we count by the FBI, the UCR definitions. So I saw what you sent me from New York City, and while I'm a fan of the CompStat process, I wasn't necessarily a fan of that. So we had modified, or created actually a report that has similar information on it. Some cities have gotten in trouble for trying to parse out aggravated assaults that way and reporting them differently. So we, if you take a look at this and see, I did not separate people that were shot or people that could have been shot, because by the UCR FBI definition, an aggravated assault is an aggravated assault. But what I did do at the bottom of the top section, you can see aggravated assault firearm victims and aggravated assault firearm incidents. So you can kind of get a picture. So I brought this for you to take a look at, and over the next month or so we can tweak this a little bit. But I am not a proponent of parsing out people that are shot versus people that aren't shot, because the reason that they didn't get shot, maybe they just ducked quickly. And so if we're talking about violence and trying to have an intervention with violence, from Sam Dotson's perspective, I don't want anybody to be shot, but I don't want to create a distinction between people that are shot and people that aren't shot. I want to be able to solve that crime. So take a look at this over the next month or so, and we can talk about it, and we can perhaps make some adjustments to it. This is similar to what New York City does, and it's got some 5-year and 10-year comparisons in it, which I think are something that you talked about, just to give you reference to that. But I don't want to deviate from the UCR definition too much.
Yeah, and I think that was more of a, not necessarily for reporting, to the FBI, but more for a local internal kind of report, so we can have a measure of actually how many people are suffering from gun violence.
And this, the way that it's done is probably the most extreme, because it captures every aggravated assault. I take every aggravated assault, whether they're shot or not shot, seriously and equally seriously. So I hear you. Take a look at this and we can have a conversation about it.
One metric I hadn't seen in here is response times, and with the new districts created, are you keeping track of that? And that's something you can share with us, how response times are?
I will. I'll bring it next month. And I would say of the 6 districts, the response time and it fluctuates monthly, but of the 6 districts, response times in 4 have improved, and the response times in 2 are probably equal or slightly down a little bit. But they're all within a very narrow window of really a minute apiece. So all 6 districts' response time is within really just about a minute of each. But we do keep track of that, and I can certainly bring that next time.
Okay. Recently, I think it was in the last week or so, we saw another judgment against the police department. This one was, I think, another $175,000. We're starting to get into some worrisome territory here. I mean, we've gotten at least $1 million in judgments in the last few months. Is this something that you're dealing with, or something you're taking steps to deal with?
There are really, let's talk about 3 that have happened in the last year, 8 months or so. First one involved an individual that was denied a transfer into the academy, and he made an allegation of reverse discrimination. I think the total settlement on that was about $400,000, if I remember correctly. So we're evaluating our transfer policy. We're evaluating any accusations of retaliation. That happened city control. It happened pre-Sam Dotson. So that one was settled 8 months ago, 6 months ago, some amount of time. The second one is under appeal, so I don't want to say too much about that. And that's the Tanisha Ross Page, which was a $7.5 million settlement, if I agree. That's under appeal. We have met with the city councilor to look at our policies to see if there's some improvement that we can make there. And then the last one was $175,000, which was an employment case, which there were multiple claims by the individual, and all but one were found in favor of the department. So we're looking at that in conversation with the city councilor. I don't see an appeal there, but I think also the city councilor is comfortable with the actions that the department took and said that we did everything that was reasonable in that case. So we do look at each of them. I formed a committee, let's talk about the middle one, the Tanisha Ross Page. I formed a committee to look at our sexual harassment policy, our discrimination policy, our retaliation issues, and make recommendations, and we have a meeting with the city councilor scheduled, probably early next week. So I agree with you. They're always worrisome and always concerning to me, and we do look to see if there is some flaw in policy. I think the other side is that we always are at the mercy of a jury. And so how a jury interprets the law, we know this, is sometimes different than how you or I would, or how a judge would, or how... So I think we always have to weigh those two, but I agree, $400,000 and $7.5 million are significant dollar amounts.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Just quickly, I'm glad to see the statistics are down, even though everybody's going to believe what they want to believe, no matter what we say. I still keep going back to the same thing. My son's in homicide, and I'm more interested in crime prevention. It's only going to happen if the people in neighborhoods decide to get on board with the police to help. And no matter the statistics, if they're up or down, and I just know from my own neighborhood, because we go to neighborhood meetings and say crime's down, and they have a preconceived notion of whether they really are or not. I just keep preaching the same thing over and over. It's going to have to take neighborhood cooperation in order to really keep crime down, and murders in particular. My son, we had this conversation not that long ago. He said, Dad, it's not that we don't know who's doing it, we know. So we can't make an arrest unless people cooperate, and they don't for a lot of reasons. You know, I'm in the Big Brothers program, and his friend got shot and killed on his lawn and died in his house. And it's intimidating for the people in the neighborhood, too, because these guys rule by that fear. You know, gee, if we testify, he's in jail, but his buddy's going to come out. But it's a problem that, you know, frustrates my own son. There's no real good answer to it, but the only way it's ever going to stop is if we get beyond the fear, and you know, it's the only way, you know, and that's really all. It's just more of a statement, you know, than anything. But that's the only way we're ever going to stop it, is if everybody would just cooperate, which is extremely difficult. I'm done. That was my
And I absolutely agree. I think over time, the police department has been a victim of mission creep, of increased expectations, and people expect us to have magic powers, if you will. I think the men and women of the police department do an outstanding job every day. I think that there are a variety of reasons that have led to the dramatic decrease that we've seen since 2006. I think economic development plays a key role. I think educational opportunities, I think a variety of things, but I also think it's because of the hard work of the men and women of the police department and your son in the homicide division. So, but we cannot do it without partnerships in the community, because every crime, every arrest that we make needs to be followed through in prosecution and followed through in the courtroom with the judge to make sure that an outcome that keeps the city safe. And this is really, I kind of just offer this up to the committee at some point. Myself, Jennifer Joyce, Dan Isom, Rick Rosenfeld, the mayor, all talked to the circuit attorney about an armed offender docket. And the circuit courts did something that, in my words, and I've said this publicly, is nothing more than window dressing. So if we need to be serious, if we want to be serious, and we need to be serious about crime in the city of St. Louis, I think we need to speak as a unified voice and really let the judges know that just like I am, just like you are, they're held accountable for their actions, and what happens in the city of St. Louis. So perhaps going forward, if we re-energize that conversation, there could be a united voice, not only from the mayor's office, but from City Hall completely to the judges, because you're in the neighborhoods, in your neighborhoods more than I am, but we're all out in the neighborhoods, and you hear from the public that violence is still an issue and a challenge.
All right. Alex, do you have questions?
Just a couple things, couple statements. Chief, thank you for showing up today and bringing your high rankers up. So, anyway, I mean, I think overall, police officers do a great job. I think the officers that wear the blue shirts out there, you know, they're on their front line every day. You know, they don't know if they're going to come home every day or not. A lot of people look at police officers differently. I mean, I rode with a police officer last week, and I actually had a real good experience of what it's like. And to me, response time, I think they get there as fast as they can, but I think it's kind of tough when you have a call at Broadway and Catlin for an assist. Then when you're back in service, your next call is up around Bingham and Keokuk because other cars are out of service. So I try to stress to my constituents, you know, don't get mad, it's just the way it is with this redistricting. So I understand.
Well, and I think it just, I think we have to put in context, not just redistricting, but even beforehand too, because cars were out of service. But
Right. And I see what you're saying. And so I understand the realm of it, how it's going back and forth. You got cars out of service on another call, so this officer is the next available or whatever and going. And it does take a little extra time, but I think they do the best they can on the response time. The other thing is talking about overall statistics, homicides and murders are down. I seem to think, and I think you would agree with me, in Dutchtown the last couple of years now, homicides and murders are pretty well spiked in that area, have went up. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if it's, you know, you say the education, no high school education. Well, I never completed high school. I think I turned out pretty good. Of course, I had my problems when I was younger, I'm not going to lie. But I think it's just the people you hang with. I mean, who gets you in that realm of circle? I mean, if you're a young kid out there, let's face it, I'd rather sling dope for $300-500 a day than go to school. And I mean, that's how the realm of the society is. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, you know, and I'm not saying this to be redundant. I think a lot of people who live in North St. Louis are moved from North St. Louis and come further south because of the problems up there. I mean, I really do. It's just a fact of reality. Just to get away from that, you know, sense of growing up in the neighborhoods. You know, parents, I mean, north and south, a lot of times this kid's one parent. And maybe the mother or father who's working 2 and 3 jobs. So it's hard to keep an eye on your son or daughter, what they're doing at the same time. You're just hoping that they're going to school and getting an education and learning to hang with the right kids. It's tough for police officers to be social workers on calls, I agree. You know, I'll go back to a call that said their uncle was out of control, he was urinating, he's doing this, he's being belligerent. I mean, but nobody in that family alerted a police officer that he had some kind of mental problem. And so it makes it a tough call. I don't know if a lot of people really understand adrenaline. I mean, you know, I've seen it, done it, I've been there. And adrenaline is probably the hardest thing to turn off. It really is, and I'm being honest. And if you really don't know what that means, you'll never have a clue. You talk to a lot of police officers. I have a lot. I mean, I talk to a lot of them on the streets. I mean, I don't know, is the answer, do we need more policemen in the police department? Some say not really, you know, maybe we need to be utilized better. I don't know how you do that. Are we getting too top heavy in the police department where we're promoting too many white shirts or too many sergeants? And then the question is, I think the average is, and I think I'm pretty well correct, is we have a sergeant for almost every 3.5 police officers on the street. And that's pretty close to that. So the sergeants, I know some's on the street, but is a lot of them in the office, or I mean, I know they have to come out and answer calls when they call for a supervisor, but are they all actually patrolling the streets at the same time too? And I'm not trying to be redundant or anything. I mean, I'm just asking. This is stuff I hear. So, you know, police department absorbs a lot of money, and when we have 1,300 some police officers, do we need as many white shirts as we have? Maybe put a hold on it for a couple of years till we reevaluate promotions, where it kind of keeps the money in the department, where you're not using more money for paying higher ranks and benefits and everything, and generate some money into the police department. Maybe where we could use that for a raise for the policemen. I mean, I know they haven't had raises for years, and you hear the same thing from firemen. But the firemen always got a raise when the police department did, you know, because they had a good lobbyist years ago, I guess. But I mean, I'd like to see if we had to save and stop promotions, you know, to save money in the police department, give police a raise somewhere down the line. I'd like to see that, because a lot of times morale is just so down. It really is. And then I know out of a heated moment you made that remark, and I mean, it just degenerated morale worse. But you was man enough to apologize, and I give you that. And you know, maybe, you know, there probably is policemen don't do as good as this group or this group and that group. But I think in a critical time, you'll get 100% out of each one of them when it comes crunch time. So that's all I want to say. But I mean, overall, police do a great job. I think they're under a lot of stress these days. I wouldn't be a policeman nowadays. Everybody has a video camera and always looks for something, you know, to jam you up. And I mean, until you really see the proof of what happens, you're convicted before you get a chance. If you go back to that Shell Station incident a few years ago, I mean, there was remarks, you know, from our mayor who come out and basically convicted the policeman over before he actually knew the whole story. So, anyway, that's all I got to say. But I think everybody does a great job.
I appreciate that. If I kind of start just kind of at the top and work down a little bit. I think any department that you ask would say, do they want more officers? Absolutely. But I think the fiscal reality of it is that we probably are funded where we can be funded. I think the police department probably has grown over the last 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, faster in contribution from the city, general fund money, faster than any other department in the city. I think you have to talk about pension costs, which are over $30 million for one unit, for one department this year. But when you say more officers, I think you have to look at, we're continuing to move the needle in the right direction. Again, spikes happen, but crime over the last 10 years is lower than where it was. So I think that anecdotally the officer would say, sure, I'd like 2 people in every car, and I'd like to drive a new car, and I would like this. But realistically, I think this is where the challenge is for me as a manager and for you as the elected officials in the city of St. Louis to really prioritize the dollars, create the priorities for the city, and we are pushing crime in the right direction. Always would like to do it faster, always would like to do more. So I think we are. So I think we're staffed at a good number right now. Talking about top-heavy, we are moving and reducing the number of command. Just as an example, when I took over, after I was unfortunate enough to take over this position last year, we had a deputy chief retired. A pretty important, prominent position in the police department. We didn't replace that person and actually took it out of the budget this time, because I see a police department that does have fewer senior commanders, a flatter organization, if you will. I think since I've been chief in the last 14, 16 months, I've promoted 1 captain, if I remember correctly, and not more than 2 or 3 lieutenants, 5 sergeants. So we have not been making promotions. We've actually been moving down that direction to flatten the organization a little bit. But as you talked about the incident with the officers and the mentally ill gentleman, as you talk about other situations, supervision is critical and key. We have police officers that come out of the academy well trained. They know their tactics, how to use their defensive tactics, how to use their weapon, the procedures. But what they lack is that real world experience that we know. And you were in the sheriff's department. You understand real world experience is important. We need to make sure that we've got the proper amount of oversight that we, to Alderman French's point, don't find ourselves in a situation where we're engaged in litigation or something like that. So our span of control is between 4 and 6. I think 3.5, somebody was trying to hedge a little bit. And I think that's what the managers will tell you, the management will tell you, is a good span of control. The vast majority of our supervisors are out in the districts. But we have homicide units, they need supervisors. We have sex crimes unit, they need supervisors. Traffic Safety Mobile Reserve. So we've tried to spread it out as much as we could through the organization. So we have about 13, all in the department, about 1,300 officers. About 1,250 are paid for out of the general fund. That other 50 are contracts or grants. So I do agree, and we are moving towards that. But it takes time and attrition, and we will have a flatter organization going forward.
Yeah, that's my point. I think the attrition is we have right now we have 4 lieutenant colonels. So as one retires, we're not going to replace them.
And here's I've said publicly.
And I mean I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but how many lieutenant colonels do we really need?
I've said between 2 and 3, I think, is the right number for the organization. I think structuring it in a silo of administration and enforcement is the right answer. And that's where, under my tenure, at least, where we're headed. And I see the flattening of that organization. But now kind of follow that through, and everything has kind of a cause and effect relationship. If you limit the opportunity for advancement and promotion, you talked about morale, that's a big morale buster. And we do know that we have quite a few officers, for a variety of reasons, one of them being advancement, do decide to go to other departments. So I think that's where we're challenged as managers to move that morale up, keep those incentives in place so we can retain the best possible officers that we can. And then the last thing that you kind of touched on was the mental health issue. As the federal government and as the state has cut support for mental health programs, the police department has been left as the provider of first and last and only resort in some cases. And while we give our officers, we've had over 700 officers trained in crisis intervention training, crisis intervention team, CIT training, the same exact training that St. Louis County and lots of jurisdictions through the department go through. Again, they're police officers, and they're not counselors, they're not therapists, they're not social workers, and they do the best job. And while that incident was brought to our attention, there were literally hundreds of instances a week where police officers deal with individuals that have varying degrees of mental illness, and they do it flawlessly and they do it well.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Chief Dotson, for coming out, and also for, I guess you passed the message along to your captains and stuff, because they have been very responsive and have been working closely with myself and coming out to our ward meetings and our community meetings to, you know, better inform constituents of what they should do. I have 2 questions. One is, how do you handle it, or what's the process when you have a city park that's a problem property or a public nuisance? And the second question I have is, I know we had met a couple of months back, and you all spoke of a JAG grant or something that you all received to do a video wall, and just to, I guess, to bring us up to par where we need to be so that we can have those cameras and have them operate in real time. So I wanted to know what the time frame is on that and where are we at in that process.
We'll take the last one first. We'll take the Real-Time Intelligence Center. In the bond issue that the city is proposing, and we'll go out to the voters in November, I believe it is, there is $5.9 million in that budget, which would create the Real-Time Intelligence Center. We did receive a grant. It was a modest grant. It was $86,000. But the bulk of the Real-Time Intelligence Center will come from the city bond that's going out if it passes. And as individuals, whether aldermen or neighborhoods or whatever, put cameras out there, what's missing is a location to monitor the cameras, if you will, to aggregate the cameras together. So we've looked around the country for best practices. We went to Memphis, Chicago, New York, Kansas City, LA. We went all over to see where the best practices were. Chicago probably has the best model of a public-private partnership. And what that means is that the police department in Chicago, I think there are about 22,000 cameras. The city owns less than a third of them, and the rest are owned by private enterprises. What they do is they bring those cameras into their real-time intelligence center. And so if there's a problem in one of your parks, or if there's a problem in your neighborhood, then they start to pay attention to those cameras. The research tells us that cameras by themselves are not a deterrent to crime. It's only when they're actively monitored and actively engaged upon. So we're working towards creating that infrastructure, that backbone that'll allow us to bring, if you have cameras, and I know you have cameras, to bring those cameras in together, but also allow us to bring private entities like the Central West End Business Association or BJC or the Downtown Partnership or whoever, bring all their cameras in. I think we always have to be careful about creating a realistic expectation. The police officers that monitor them are not going to be security guards and watch for people going in and out of doors. But when activity is happening in those neighborhoods, they can watch those cameras and hopefully give real-time information to the officers on the ground, and they can be able to respond and prevent crime, make arrests, whatever the situation is. So that's what I'd like to see. And I can bring a video at some point and show you. There was Philadelphia, there was a news story, and it was a TV news story, but it really showed what we're trying to get to. A video wall, analyst, real-time information, triaging calls, feeding into the crime center, and stuff coming in and going out in real time. So that's where we're headed, but it's really going to be dependent on if this general obligation bond passes in November. And then the build time after that, probably about 12 months, just to be realistic. We might be able to do it a little bit quicker, but just to set expectations, but we can't start till the money's in place. So that's the real-time intelligence center. Problem properties for the parks, I don't think we can hold the parks director responsible for that. But what we do is, if there's a specific problem like a hotspot, we create an enforcement strategy to work on that. So if you have a specific problem, when we know about it, we'll work on it and address it. And it's trying to change the behavior of the people that are creating the problem in that park, neighborhood, whatever it is. I don't see a park being any different than a neighborhood, a block. We just have to change the behavior.
All right. Alderman Carter.
Hey, how you doing, Chief? Excuse me for being a little, I don't know if these were answered or not, but what are the duties of the neighborhood liaison officer? I have just a few questions, I'm sorry. That's the first one. The second one.
You want to just do one at a time, is that okay?
Yeah.
So the duties of the neighborhood liaison officer are to organize the neighborhood, to answer questions, to be the conduit to the police department. So whether it's addressing a problem property or working with the district captain for a problem property, whether it's organizing them into a neighborhood watch or into a court watch program, all of those things are in that responsibility. So if there's something specific that they're doing you like, great. If there's something they're not doing, I'd want to know about it so we can try and address it.
Okay. Well, no, I didn't know because recently there has been a mix-up of who should handle what in terms of problem properties or nuisance issues or just other issues. One would refer to the problem property officer, then back and forth. And
I'm looking at Major Robinson because it's North Patrol. Do you want to kind of address that just for a second?
Repeat that, Alderman Carter.
Well, no, I just asked basically because with my neighborhood liaison officer and my problem property officer, they go back and forth on who should handle what. And I mean, the problem property officer, he's stacked with a whole bunch of stuff anyway. So, I didn't know if she could offset some by helping him out or what her actual duties were.
They work together as a tandem to address the problems in your wards in the districts. And like you say, they are tasked with a lot of duties as far as responsibilities are concerned. But they come together as a team, and then they work under Sergeant McLaughlin, who does a real good job relative to problem properties. But if you need more assistance, we'll look at that issue and get with Captain Kuntz and see if we can address those problems.
I spoke with Captain Kuntz yesterday. I mean, he's aware. He told me that he'll take care of it.
Okay.
But I just didn't know, and he didn't give me that answer yesterday. Our neighborhood stores basically have been a home for crime forever. I have one market, particularly in my ward, where you can go and get everything. You can go and get a gun, K-12, what is it, K2, Molly, everything. And so is there any coordination plan between the police department and the excise commission to kind of curtail some of this stuff? Because I don't only have that problem. I know Alderman French, Alderwoman Flowers, and a few other aldermen, they kind of express the same thing. Well, these stores are getting out of control, and basically, if you shut down, some of these major stores, then that would end crime in a particular area.
That's a great question, and as you may know, or you may not know, that in our budget we proposed adding an enforcement position in the police department to handle excise issues. I think that by having a police officer that focuses specifically on excise issues, that works with John McLaughlin, that can leverage the problem property issues, will move that in the right direction. I have been challenged sometimes around even my enforcement strategies because of the split between responsibilities and duties. So I'm trying to centralize that or provide the excise more resources and myself more resources. I've heard that not only from you but from other alder people. I think it is a concern, and if the budget passes as is, there's a position in there that's what they will do. 40 hours a week, they'll focus on issues like that. Because I've heard you, and we've come up with a strategy.
And I don't know, are you guys and Jennifer Joyce's office, are you looking at tweaking or changing anything in the problem property process? Because what I see now is, I think it was when I was first elected as alderman, which I think was a year and a half ago, someone asked me to give them my top 5 problem properties. And these were like my worst ones. I could name them right off the top of my head. And I'm still dealing with those same properties now. And I've given neighbors that wanted to work and give information, and the information was given and stuff was coordinated, but they still don't see anything done. And I know how long the process will take, but what do I tell a neighbor that has given others information, that has talked to the department, but they still see constant drug sales, everything next door to them or right across the street from them?
But let's talk with the new city councilor. It's not Jennifer Joyce in the property.
Okay.
It's the new city councilor, Winston Calvert. And we feel the same pain that you do, because due process sometimes in our system errs on the side of the person that we're trying to move against in that building. So I do share your frustration in a lot of cases about that. Let's ask the new city councilor where problem properties are in his priorities, and I think they're going to be high. I really do think they're going to be high, and see if there are ways that we can streamline the process or move it forward. But just from my own personal experience as being a district captain and dealing with Silver Court, which is in the West Goodfellow neighborhood, the process is slow and arduous and really works against us in the city sometimes because it is so slow. And just like you hear, hey, they're still there. I hear that complaints too. They're still there. And we know they're in the process, and we've done everything we can. We just haven't got that outcome of resolution yet.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation with the new city councilor is probably a good idea to see where they are in his priorities list.
Is there a difference, and I'm sorry that I didn't get a chance to research this, but is there a difference between the county and ours? Because I ran a little experiment for the past 2 months. So I gave some properties and some problems that I have that border Jennings, or like my county line. I gave them the same properties that I gave to the city, and as of yesterday, they almost hammered. Well, I know that they kicked in 3 of them, 3 out of 5. And they took people to jail and closed down a few houses. And so, is there a difference in the county's process, or how they handle stuff versus ours?
Well, I think and without knowing the specifics of them, I think for problem properties, we don't normally kick in the door. That sounds like it was a search warrant.
It was like, yeah, it was drugs and, the same thing. But, I mean, when I say problem properties, I mean drugs, shootings, etc.
And I don't know if you're trying to fair. We do quite a few search warrants. Our search warrants a lot of times are focused on guns and on violence. I don't know the number, but we have our mobile reserve, our SWAT team does all of our entries for us. And when I see their stuff, they're doing a couple search warrants a day almost.
Yeah, when we do search warrants, they have a standing order to bring Project 37 in, trying to search warrant to deal with the houses dedicated and start the closure process. But the closure process in the city is quite, as you know, quite a lengthy process, and to start then to be over a year sometimes
Right,
to do those
right.
processes, so, and that's a part we don't control. We can only get it into the system, and then we're just part of that system too with our officer testimony and stuff as part of the process to close down that.
Okay. All right, I got one more question, and I'll be through it. Let's see. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you heard about my amendment for the $400,000 out of the asset forfeiture money to go strictly towards community-based programs. And I know that you and I have talked before, and I don't know if it was anything that money was dedicated towards, but I know that you did express that you wanted to create some type of programming for that. So is that something that you support, or?
And that's,
that's it.
yeah, let me answer your question. Most directly, yes. The problem is, and we'll kind of back up for a second, and the budget director's right around the corner, if I'll step in for a second. I do support using that money using some money for community-based programs. The equitable sharing program has a cap that you can only spend 15% of a 2-year average on community-based programs. And then at that point, you can't transfer the money directly to the community-based programs. They have to submit eligible expenses to you for reimbursement. And the way that I understand it, while the total asset forfeiture line is about $3 million, what is probably missing from that is we have already spent some of that money for community-based programs historically. Do the Right Thing, Crime Stoppers, the Explorer program. So there's probably not $400,000 available. Looking at Dave Daniels, who's the budget director, the true number is probably around $104,000, $105,000.
What you can spend on community-based programs in any specific fiscal year is based upon taking the prior 2 years' revenues and multiplying them by 15%.
I think we took that and it came out to $473,000 and some change, a little bit roughly.
The revenues?
Oh, not of the revenues. It was strictly of asset forfeiture.
And that's the problem. That is multiple years of money accumulating, and so that's not 1 year. That's not 2 years. That's multiple years of accumulating, and out of that, money has already spent for programs like Do the Right Thing, for Crime Stoppers, and so I do agree with you and support it. And whatever the maximum that we can go up to and spend is, we'll go up to that and spend. But it looks like it's about $104,000, $105,000
roughly. But we won't know for certain until the end of the fiscal year because we could have revenue come in before June 30th.
Okay. Because that $3.1 million it could be, some of the money could be 4 and 5 and 6 years old, and that's why.
Could we get a breakdown on what those programs were? Because I never heard of Do the Right Thing.
Yeah, Do the Right Thing is with Robin Smith on Channel 4, where we bring those grade school kids in and give them certificates for doing the right thing. So that's something that we spend at least $5,000 a year, and I don't know exactly what it is, at least $5,000.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the movie.
Yeah. So let me. I do agree that some of that asset forfeiture money can and should be spent on those programs. The question is, we just have to figure out the right dollar amount to do it, so we don't violate the law.
Right. Okay. Last question.
And then we've got a couple of programs that were youth empowerment type programs that we're looking at and talking about and things like that. So I agree, and I said that the last time we were together. It's just when you ask me for a dollar amount, I know these rules exist. I just want to make sure that we're right.
Okay. Perfect. Can can Alderwoman Chrissy and French, can we get reimbursed out of that out of that bond that you money from White Caps? No, I'm just joking.
That's a good idea.
But that is a good idea. I need that money back.
Don't drag me into this.
Yeah, I need that money back. Thanks. Thank you.
Alderwoman Gracia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for spending some time with us this morning, Chief. I guess I just wanted to state overall, crimes against properties in the 6th Ward seem to be going down, but between 2011 and 2014, we've gone from 0 to 3 murders at April 2013 to April 2014. We've gone from 15 aggravated assaults with a gun to 21 this year. And our robberies have been sort of status quo. And I indicated that was something similar when we sat down at the beginning of the year. And a lot of my problems are coming from Fox Park. And while there seem to be spotty endeavors to solve crime there, I feel like someone comes in for a couple of days and then everyone's gone. Fox Park, the park itself, is an issue, and the streets of Fox Park and some streets in Tower Grove East are issues where folks just don't feel safe. And so what is the criteria for being a neighborhood that's allowed to be involved in hotspot policing?
And we look at the data at a city level and identify the problem areas that we have. And then we move those resources into that neighborhood. When we redistrict, the idea was to give each captain what we call an overlay, but those officers that are not assigned to beats in the district to be able to go in and problem solve. So I think what we should first start with is sitting down with your captain and you and I and the major, and we can do that, and kind of step through your issues and see what their strategies are and see if their strategies, if the solution is within the resources that they have, and then if it's not, then we can start to look at other resources. I hear you in every neighborhood, once more, and I get that, but we go to where the problems are, and we have the biggest ability to make an impact to keep people safe. So I think probably the best strategy is for us to sit down with the colonel and the major and the captain and kind of walk through your issues and see if problem properties can help, to see if it's a special operations problem, to see if neighborhood ownership model is doing what we expect it to do, and if there's something we can do there to get all of our partners in there. And this is, I think, it's a great question. I think this is the way that it's supposed to work. And so we look at, I look at crime throughout the whole city. I look at it by district, and then I break it down into neighborhoods. And so, as you can imagine, when you look at 79 neighborhoods, your interests get drawn in many different directions. But if you have a specific problem, let's sit down and see if we can develop a strategy that will address it. I think we have to be realistic and figure out what the cause is. It could be economics, could be demographic shift, it could be a variety of things. It could be one family that moved into a neighborhood. And let's see if we can work our way back down to the core of the root problem.
Okay, thanks again.
All right. I think we've been around to the entire committee. Are there, let's do it this way because some committee members have left. Are there any other committee members who have questions after the discussion that's occurred? I'm going to go in seniority. So I see Boyd has his hand up.
Yes, Chief. Shot spotter, was that included in the bond issue?
It was not. We did not put that technology into the bond issue. I see going forward that may be an option that we could spend asset forfeiture money on perhaps. ShotSpotter has changed their model a little bit. When the system that was put into the Wells Goodfellow neighborhood, it was an outright purchase, $300,000 plus. Mm-hmm. Now they've changed it to a subscription-based service, about, don't quote me, but about $50,000 a square mile. And so the question is on a going forward basis, is that the type of commitment that we want to make into a specific neighborhood? The other thing that we're seeing around the country is that ShotSpotter by itself has limited effect. What a lot of cities are moving towards is ShotSpotter tied in with video cameras. So what happens is that when a shot goes off in that neighborhood, there are some number of video cameras, and the video cameras turn towards the location of that to try and catch an individual, to try and catch a car, to do something like that. The way the system works now, it's basically on a Google map. You get a pin dropped on a location where a shot occurred, and then the officers have to go there and really start from scratch. All they have is that now the system's told them there's a shot. If we can get video, then it makes sense. So as we move into the real-time intelligence center, that's something that we could expand into there. I like the technology, but it still needs to be refined. Not the technology itself, but the application needs to be refined a little bit.
I find this an amazing tool. I wonder what the percentage is as far as 911 calls versus ShotSpotter response calls to shots. And it just reminded me, I believe when the 16-year-old was killed on Clara, I don't think there were any 911 calls, it was a ShotSpotter call. And that's not the first time I've heard that happen. Somebody was killed in the 5300 block of Theodosia a year or two ago. The same thing happened. And that's kind of a concern. I mean, it seemed like maybe we're too desensitized to gunshots in the neighborhood. It just kind of bothers me. And I want to add it to Hamilton Heights if possible, but we can talk more about it. But I do think it's a useful tool. And I would like to move forward on something in the future.
And anything that we can do to continue to encourage people to call, I agree with, because we need them involved and active. I will tell you, the benefit of the ShotSpotter system over the call is it gives us, within about 3 meters, a geographic location. So when people call and say, well, I heard shots in the alley, I don't know if it was the north alley or the south alley, this gives us a pen drop, within a couple of yards of where the technology believes it happened. So I do that, but you're right, we got to keep people engaged and involved.
So we should get together soon. If I have to use capital improvement,
What concerns me is they've changed their model. Well, it used to be a $350,000 investment where you'd recoup over a couple of years. Now an ongoing subscription fee is, and so it adds up quickly. 5 square miles is $250,000, a quarter $250,000 a year.
I believe I saw Alderman Vaccaro had another question.
Just 2 follow-ups. One was to answer your question. On the bars or stores that are selling liquor, we've had that a couple times, and the same people that signed for a liquor license can rescind it. And we closed down one as little as 2 weeks ago. The neighbors kept telling me about it, and like I told them, there's nothing I can do, but they, if you don't get the plat, which they did, they can shut down or take away anybody's liquor license. It takes 51% of 3 categories to get a liquor license: registered voters, homeowners, and businesses. But it only takes 51% of any one of those to take it away. And we just shut one down 2 weeks ago. They took their liquor license away. The other thing, so it was just a comment. The other thing, though, Chief, and I keep going back to neighborhood help. How many arrests do you think you made last year? Do you know how many didn't get convicted because, you may not know the answer, because they couldn't get the cooperation from the neighborhood?
And we don't keep track of that. I believe the circuit attorney keeps track of it. But just to give you an idea, each year we make between 27 and 30,000 arrests. That's all charges, all in, and it can be for ordinance violations, misdemeanors, felonies, probation violations, all. But just to give you an idea of the workload of the Metropolitan Police Department, those 1,300 officers make between 27 and 30,000 arrests. That's a lot of work, and they do a great job with it. The circuit attorney is probably the one to most accurately portray what kind of conviction rate that they get.
I was just curious, because I know, again, I just keep going back, without neighborhood support, they don't even issue on them.
And that's it. And I think maybe as an education piece, we all need to spend some time talking that the arrest isn't the end of the process. The arrest is actually very early on in the process. And unless the circuit attorney is involved, and unless the witnesses and victims in cases are involved, and unless the courts are involved, then we don't get an outcome that makes the city any safer. What we get is the repeat calls that, Mrs. Smith calling that, you arrested Johnny yesterday for whatever crime on the corner, and 2 days later he's back on that corner doing the same crime. Yeah. They get frustrated with the police because we're the ones that answer the call, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when really we've done our part of it. Either the community hasn't followed through with it, the circuit attorney hasn't followed through, or the courts have failed us.
I don't know about the other Alderman, but I assume all of us the same. People will call us and have an expectation that we can do something, and in some cases we can, and some we can't. But due process is always a problem. I shouldn't say a problem, but it's...
For the attorneys, due process is a problem.
Certainly it's a hurdle, though. I mean, we have a house in the neighborhood that I've had in court for almost 4 years now.
You go run against Jennifer, see?
No, I wouldn't. And Jennifer does a wonderful job. I will say that publicly. I like Jennifer. No, I'm just saying that even with what we do, I think the expectations, like you said earlier, are that we can do a lot more than we can. And just like these guys, we do the best we can to get stuff done. And that, without community involvement, it's just not going to happen.
Democracy isn't pretty, but it's the best we have.
Oh, no, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that when you can't get anybody to, like if a neighbor calls about an issue.
We all know.
And nobody other than you, and then you can call the police and say, well, they got a noise ordinance, the dog's barking all the time, 24 hours a day. You call the police. They have the police go over there. The dog's not barking. You call the neighbor, you say the dog's not barking. They say, well, but he was the rest of the time. So now do we post a police officer out there 24 hours a day with a tape recorder to make sure the dog barks remote? But I'm just saying there's
We've all had those experiences.
I know, that's what I'm saying, but I was just commenting on the chief's thing earlier, that the expectations higher, but without the neighborhood's help, it's impossible. It's more of a statement that, you know, we need neighborhood, we do. Just like the police, we gotta have neighborhood support to get things resolved.
Alderman Arnowitz, did you have your finger going up because you have another comment or question?
Just a quick comment. Chief, thank you for your time. Appreciate it, and I don't want you to take me wrong that I'm downgrading anybody. It's just things I see and learn. It's not easy being the chief. I just wish as we move on to the future, I think, as you stated, we lose a lot of veteran police officers, you know, this training, and I think the biggest thing is you as the chief probably, you know, and you probably do, is rely on your veteran police officers on the street that's out there every day, and they know what's going on, and I think that's probably, you know, would help you as a chief, you know, you helping them have the faith in each other to try to do things as you see they need to be done. I also want to say Sergeant McLaughlin does a great job with Problem Properties Officer. I'm very happy with mine. They do a great job. I try not to wear them out. And I hope that we always have the problem police officers there. And I will say this too, personally, I think we got a great police department. I put them against anybody. And that's just how I feel. I've seen them out there, you know, you got a lot of war veterans as policemen now. You know, and they learn the streets pretty fast, so I just want to thank everybody. I mean, Major Layshock, he was probably one of the best police officers growing up on the street. So he knows them street corners from years ago, but I think everybody does, and I think a lot of times, you know, we all need to recognize that instead of always, you know, I think us as elected officials, we don't really blame anyone. We just really need to see how the realm of the tools work, and so I don't think anybody's here to criticize the police department. It's just that we need to learn how things work, and I do enjoy maybe meeting once a month. I think that will help a lot. So you have a lot on your plate, but I appreciate your time and everybody else's.
Just while the alderman mentioned it, I'll just pass out. Here is a list of public affairs meetings that are happening at the area stations around the city. These are really through the end of the year, so you know, they're by district, so I think probably most of you know what district you're in. But if you have any questions, these are held at the area stations. For the most part, the first district is held, well, actually they're held at a variety of places. The 5-Star Senior Center, the Feast and Fox, Central Patrol, so they're held at a variety of locations. But these are our community outreach meetings that happen on a consistent, regular basis for the rest of the year throughout the city.
All right.
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you.
Alderman French, I think you had a follow-up.
Yeah, quick
Now that
questions.
you've had time to look over that chart.
Yeah, so I just want to see if I'm reading this right. So it shows that year to date through the end of May, there were 552 victims of gun violence?
By the UCR count, yes. Okay. And UCR count is people that were in harm's way that could have reasonably been shot, or people that were actually shot. And there were 552 people that fell into that category and 309 incidents.
Okay. And then on the second chart below, it shows like for that last week of May, there were 38 victims. And the prior week, 30 victims. So we're averaging about 30 or so victims a week.
You're reading that correctly, yes.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting. The total crime index, what does that mean? Yeah, on the
UCR crime index?
On your monthly reports here of crime in neighborhoods?
That's a total count, I believe. Without looking at it, it's a total count.
It's that last column, and I was trying to figure it out. It doesn't seem to be a sum of all the numbers. It's just total crime index. And I know I've seen different neighborhood organizations sometimes use that as a ranking of how safe a neighborhood is. But I'm curious how you come up with these with that number, total crime and total index crime. Because it would show that, like, for instance, Forest Park is more dangerous than College Hill. So I'm not sure how you're calculating.
And to answer your question most directly, well, I'd have to ask what goes into the total index crime. I don't know if it's just Part 1 crimes, or I'm sorry, if it's just the violent crime. I'd have to ask what goes into that number. I don't want to tell you.
Yeah, you can maybe email that. And the last question is related to park rangers. So you guys take over park rangers on July 1. We put some extra money in there for park rangers, specifically for O'Fallon and Fairground, which you know has been a big concern of mine. So if those 4 total positions stay around in the budget, how would you use those for O'Fallon and Fairground?
Well, let me start with, first, yes, the money, I see it is in there. We have some conversation going on, and I don't know if those are appropriate uses for those categories for funds, but let's assume that they do stay in there. From a policing perspective, it kind of flies in the face of the strategy that we've been doing about putting resources into the areas that need them and hotspot policing. I understand your desire to create an environment in those 2 parks that where the people that are using the parks feel safer through visibility. So taking my objection aside, saying that I still don't think it's the right use of park rangers and the funds. If the money's set in there, then they would be dedicated during peak times, and I'll say peak times because 2 park rangers aren't enough to give you 16 hours a day coverage. You get 8 hours some days, a little bit more other days. But if the money's set in there for those 2 parks, that's during peak times that we'll be realizing that somebody will take a vacation, somebody will take a day off, those types of things. So they'll be dedicated to those 2 parks during peak times as well as we can less their days off.
Okay, so we can expect though at least 8 hours a day or seeing a park ranger in the park?
Yeah, unless both rangers are off for some reason or something like that, yeah. But the normal relief factor we use is almost 2. For every 1 position, you need 2 people to follow it up. But we work 24 hours a day. I would have to look at what the relief factor is for 16 hours a day. But if the money stays in the budget for park rangers, they will be dedicated to those 2 parks as many hours as possible, less their time off.
Great. That's it.
Thank you. Alderman Carter, any questions?
Yeah, I just have one. And I don't know if you mentioned this before, but is there any coordination between St. Louis City Police Department and St. Louis County? Because I know in my ward where I bordered the county, they come all the way over to Thrush now. And is there any coordination? Or are you guys traveling into Jennings any? Because Jennings is equally as worse as the city.
And that's a great conversation. I had a tremendous relationship with Temptation. I have a very good relationship with John Bellmer. We're looking at, and at some point this issue may come to you, we're investigating with the city council right now about cross-deputization. Cross-deputization of city officers and county officers. So for those districts that border the county, it will become less of an issue. If we have a crime that takes us into Jennings, still the county's crime, but we can make an arrest, we can do that. They can come into the city and do that. So in addition to the units we've already talked about, Metrolink, bombing and arson, Metro Air Support, our Fusion Center, we are talking about boots on the ground, cross-deputization on those fringe areas, and I see that happening. I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful that happens sooner rather than later. On a daily basis, Eddie Kuntz and John Hayden, the captain of the 6th and the captain of the 5th, do communicate with the county, and they are aware of the operations that are going on. I think Jerry, you're probably a little bit too, and Ron. They are aware of the operations that are going on back and forth, and we support each other as much as we can. But and I've said it publicly, I have a very regional approach to crime. Criminals, and you said criminals that live in Jennings offend in the city, and our criminals that live in the city may go to Jennings. So why do we let that, make-believe line, that geopolitical line, keep us from doing real enforcement strategies? Right. So that's where I'd like to see us. That's where we're headed, and I think it's important.
Alderman, thank you very much, sir. Alderwoman Ingrassia.
No further questions.
And then Alderman Ogilvie has some questions.
Thank you. Morning, Chief.
How are you?
Good. I had the same. First question. I have basically the same question as Alderman Carter. Are there specific municipalities in the county or in Metro East where we don't have a way to communicate? Are there warrants issued in St. Louis City that people in Metro East don't know about when somebody gets arrested, or somebody gets arrested in Wellston, they don't know about a warrant issued in St. Louis City, and vice versa? And how, maybe what are the limitations to correcting those issues if they exist?
Alderman, let me talk to you about that a little bit. The Metro East Task Force with auto thefts and robberies, we have at least once a month, and sometimes when there's a spike in crime, more than that, meetings to talk about violent offenders and chronic car thieves and the identification. We provide them with the identity of people that are wanted over here, especially for some downtown crime where we think the guys slip right back over the bridge. That's a really good relationship. I don't think that it's inappropriate to discuss here at this setting with the two questions that were raised, that we're doing some cross-training between the intelligence divisions of St. Louis County and St. Louis City, which is pretty exciting. It's going to help us. There have been some, I guess Alderman Carter left, but I'm aware of a conversation that happened last week about between Jennings and St. Louis City and our intelligence detectives. And we share a lot of information with those bordering municipalities, and they do to us too, because a lot of the people going over there and breaking into cars are doing it here and vice versa. So it doesn't get publicized a lot, but there's a lot of underground sharing of information.
And all of the municipalities have the same access to the criminal information records that the police department does about anybody arrested in any of those municipalities or arrested in the city of St. Louis are wanted by us or any of the other municipalities. So that all of that information is available to all the 79 municipalities and unincorporated St. Louis County police departments as it is to us.
And we have a group that we call the Warrant Fugitive Unit. They do two things. They go around locally 16 hours a day? 16 hours a day, and that's all they do is pick up prisoners from municipalities that they are holding for us. For bench warrants, if it's an active wanted card, if somebody's wanted for a serious crime, the detectives will go out and pick them up. And in addition to that, we do get at-large warrants issued from the Circuit Attorney's Office. We have individuals that travel around the country and pick up suspects for murder, for rape, for serious crimes. So we do put all of the warrants that are eligible will go into NCIC, which is the national database, which if you get stopped in Indianapolis, Cleveland, and that department detains you, they contact us, we go and pick you up. Locally, the wanteds and the warrants that are applicable are put into Regis. The agencies have access to that. If they hold an individual, we have two people that go 16 hours a day. That's what they do, go around and collect those individuals for us. 8 hours a day, I'm sorry, 8 hours a day.
Is that, like, if there's a traffic stop in Belleville, though, is that information, and there's a warrant for that person's arrest in St. Louis, is that information
depending on what the warrant is,
officer who's doing the traffic stop?
Depending on Belleville, depending on what the warrant is in Illinois. On the Missouri side, every agency that subscribes to Regis, which are all of them in our immediate area, have access to that. So if it's St. Anne, if it's Richmond Heights, if it's Clayton, if it's Jefferson County, they all have access to Regis. Belleville, it has to, the city ordinance is probably not, but the more serious crimes, yes.
Okay. I had a couple other questions. Kind of brief, hopefully. I know the department has been spending a lot of time on some major event planning, which obviously you have to do. But is there a way that we can maybe communicate to organizations putting on large events what the requirements are, so that there doesn't have to be, I think, so much time invested by police department management to make sure those organizations are providing the information that you guys need to plan for these events?
And if I could read between the lines, I think you're talking about that little event in Forest Park that's coming up on July 4th.
I'm just speaking generally.
We do have a very good relationship with event planners. The Forest Park the Forest Park event for Fair St. Louis is presenting some very unique challenges that we haven't experienced. So let's go back this last year, for example. We have a very cookie-cutter approach to policing the arch grounds for Fair St. Louis because we've done it for 20-plus years. We understand the dynamics of it. We have a cookie-cutter approach, my word, to Mardi Gras. We've done it for many years. We understand it. Annie Malone, all of those events. Fair St. Louis and Forest Park is presenting some new, unique challenges to us, and my commitment is to get it right. And so we're investing time, a considerable amount of time now, working with the organizers to make sure they get it right. If you've seen the Post-Dispatch the last couple of days, there's a very extensive shuttling plan, parking plan, transportation issues, congestion, neighborhood, safety on the event. It's more time than I'd like to spend, but I think it's a worthwhile investment to make sure that we get it right. If the event stays in Forest Park next year, which I think is what they're, at least preliminarily, their conversations are, their desire are, it'll be an easier process. It's the first year learning curve. To give you an idea of the scope of the issue, we will probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 officers committed, not just to Forest Park, but the surrounding areas and traffic management of that event. We've canceled all the days off for all the police officers in the department that week, that weekend, those days. So nobody's scheduled off on recreation. If you had a vacation plan with your family, we're going to allow you to go. But no discretionary days off, no recreation days off. We've got a commitment from the Highway Patrol for 25 or 30 officers each day. We've got a commitment from St. Louis County for 50, 20, and 50 officers. So 50 one day, 20 another, and 50 because they do have an event in South County on one of those days. So we've reached out. We've met with Richmond Heights, with Clayton, with University City. So everybody understands the scope and the impact of this event, and they're all putting their resources towards it. It'll be a learning experience for us to do an event of this size in Forest Park, but I think we want to get it right, and so we're making a consistent investment. A lot of focus on traffic, people coming to the event and people being able to get home from the event.
And hopefully people living there while the event happens.
He hasn't experienced Mardi Gras.
I have.
He's about to.
Visiting it is more fun than being
Real quick, statewide, police departments across the state, is there anything in particular that departments are looking at in the next legislative session, law changes you'd like to see that would make your job easier or safer?
That's a great question. I talked a little bit about the armed offender docket earlier on. I think as we go into the next legislative session, this body and the department probably need to have conversations about the propensity for the state to pass gun laws that have a negative impact in their urban cores or in the city of St. Louis. If you're not paying attention, or if you haven't been paying attention, the conceal and carry age is now dropped to 19. If you have a gun in a car and nobody claims it, I can't do anything about it. Open carry is now legal in the state of Missouri, or will be if the governor signs it, or if he doesn't sign it, it becomes law. I just don't know where that is in the process right now. What's alarming in that bill is that with open carry, even if we get a call to someone's house for a domestic disturbance, which are one of the most dangerous calls that police officers get, we cannot disarm that individual unless we have probable cause to arrest that individual. So now you're going to have police officers dealing with a domestic disturbance with an individual with a gun that we can't reasonably take that gun from. Those are the types of laws that in some community may make sense, in the city of St. Louis do not make sense. This nullification bill that failed, but failed only in the last week, made it held police officers civilly liable if they helped federal prosecution on gun crimes. Ridiculous. Again, maybe in some community makes sense, in the urban core doesn't make sense. So those are the types of things that I think as a city we need to speak with. I made several trips to Jefferson City to talk about those issues, to try and keep them from coming to fruition. Obviously the nullification bill was the most concerning.
Do you think the rest of the departments across the state are doing enough in Jefferson City to make it? I mean, because I think it's a powerful message when police chiefs are there and they say, hey, these laws endanger our police officers. You know, why are you passing these things? Are you trying to get police officers killed? You know, I think that's a powerful message that I didn't see. I didn't see all that much of, at least, you know, during those debates.
Within the last week or two of the legislative session, Chief Forte, the Kansas City chief, and I co-authored an op-ed piece that ran in St. Louis about that. The FOP and the St. Louis, or the State Police Chiefs Association, use a lobbyist in Jefferson City, and they are very effective and do have a big voice. But when you've got a legislator from Jefferson County who is running for re-election, I actually, and it wasn't from Jefferson County, I want to tell you what, I actually had a legislator say, hey, I'm running for re-election, I got to have a gun bill. And so that's the mentality and the mindset in Jefferson City, that if you want to get reelected, you got to have a gun bill. And so those are the things that we need to speak with as in Urban Core, and really the economic engine for the state, that those laws have a tremendously negative impact on our community. And so going forward, I think we probably need to scan and see the bills that are in December that are pre-filed, and really have a conversation at one of these meetings about what message does the city of St. Louis want to send around that type of legislation, about the impact it has in the city. I will tell you, Senator Nasheed was very supportive, Senator Kevney was supportive. They understand the issues, but there are only two throughout the state. And
I mean, that's why I'm asking about police chiefs and leadership throughout the rest of the state, if they are participating in that conversation to the level that you would like them to. Maybe.
I had multiple conversations with the FOP lobbyist and the Chiefs lobbyist about the things that were going on in Jefferson City and their impact to the city of St. Louis. So they have empowered their lobbyists to work really what I would believe is in our best interest. Maybe not 100% of the time, but 95% of the time they are working in our best interest.
Thanks.
Okay, I suppose, Chief, I'd like to say thanks to you and all your men and women for coming over today and giving us information and talking with us about what's going on. And we will look forward to seeing you again shortly. And I think in the interim, Richard Gray is holding meetings with aldermen from the various districts about police matters as well. So I think we're pretty up to date.
And thank you. And I, to the commanders that are here, I wanted them to have the opportunity to come. So one, you see them and you get to know them, but so they can hear your concerns too, and we can take those back. And I think all of you have my number and know how to get a hold of me. If you have issues between the next now and the next time we meet, call us. I think that it's much easier for us to solve problems that in real time than they are to have to wait a month or so to come back together.
Chair, we have some people from the public here. I was wondering if they were going to be allowed to speak, and I think that it'd be important for the chief and his staff to hear their comments before he
We did
left.
say that we would have comments from any public persons who have an interest. If you would limit it to 3 minutes, we'd be happy.
It'll be shorter than that.
All right.
Real quick,
First of all, will you tell us who you are?
Yes, my name is Rebecca McLeod. I'm a resident in the 21st Ward. I stay in the 4300 block of Clarence. Sorry, I didn't know it was in City Hall. I thought it was going to be around the corner at the sanctuary, so I just did a high skip and jump, but they informed me it was down here. I really do appreciate all the representatives here. The aldermen, Tony French is my alderman. I just want to let you know, when we do see you in the neighborhood, it's like a sigh of hope. And I think with your neighborhoods as well, residents see you as a sign of hope. And so this is presented to you. I want to thank you for your service as well as your officers. They're wonderful, but my questions to you were, of course, with the convenience stores. I can only speak as a resident, not a politician. I'm not running for anything, but I'm a single mom. I'm that person that the alderman was speaking about. Stay in the neighborhood, have 6 children. I do work, I have a career. Don't get any state assistance. But our convenience stores in the neighborhood is turning into a drug supply store. They are actually selling pseudoephedrine, in like little baby bottles, 2 ounces. I was hoping that you can at least limit the sale of pseudoephedrine in those particular neighborhoods. That's why we have Walgreens. It would help a lot. You know, the corner stores is, you know, milk, eggs, cheese, bread, you know, but NyQuil, you can have an individual come into a store 3-4 times a day and buying a whole bottle of NyQuil, but if they go to Walgreens, it would be red flag. In these,
Just tell me the name of the store, just so, or if you want to do it offline afterward, I can just tell me the name.
yes, I can. I mean, you take a pick. My family owns a corner store. I've been in my family for three generations on Athlone and Rosalie. No, it's not there. But you can take a pick. You can go into any store, and of course, it's not going to be on the counter. You have to be a regular for them to know exactly what you want. Okay, as well as unwrap wire scrub pads. They're using that for drug use. The rose in the glass. Those are, it's no one's decorating their mantle with roses in the glass. It's uses for drugs. And then it's access to the children. You know, the kids are getting strung out. Our babies, 7, 10-year-olds, they're already addicts, okay? And that's where it comes to the police officers being the social workers and, you know, being a rescuer, advocate in their home, which that's not their job, but that's the only outlet that we do have in the community. Another one is, real quick, the fear of being service. You know, why people don't step up. Real quick, a quick example, my next door neighbor actually got shot in the living room at 7 o'clock in the morning 2 years ago. And I was there, I'm not afraid of no person in my neighborhood. I speak up, I tell the police everything. But the father had the gun on him. And the sergeant was there at the scene. Of course, I couldn't speak up because they are a very ruthless family. It's only me and my children. So I pulled the officer over to the side of the sergeant. I said, the gun is on the father. But then next thing you know, I get summons to come to court, which was across the street. And I was forced to testify. And that man later, 6 months later, came back and knocked on my door and I didn't answer. So when you have situations like that, it needs to be some type of discretion if a resident do speak up and tell you, yes, you are the person, but then how are you going to protect that resident that actually spoke and when that one individual is arrested but the rest of the family is still next door or around the corner? That's where the conflict comes at, okay? And I think, oh yeah, this is my last one. This is just recently. What are you going to do with the unmarked police vehicles that actually speeds through the residential area? It's bad enough that we have people that pass up stop signs already. This was the issue I was going to bring to you in the meeting, but this is for the unmarked police cars. They're going over 40, 45 miles per hour on a residential street, one-way street. No lights, no sirens, and I have 4-year-old twins. And you know, they play. You know, I have 6 kids. Everyone is not going to be in the backyard. Our backyard is not that big. So they are outside. And is there any type of traffic code that unmarked cars should follow? Is that pursuit that important that you can mow over children? You know, so those are my questions for you.
Let's take the last one and work backwards. I don't mind if it's all right with you. Hey, we expect all of our officers to follow the traffic laws. We've actually used our in-car camera videos in some cases to bring it to the officer's attention. If you get a license plate, if you tell me something, absolutely we'll act on it. We have one of the most restrictive pursuit policies in the country. We can only pursue for dangerous felons when their escape causes imminent threat and danger. So I'd be interested to know, I'm not. Yes, I do believe that it happens. We'd like to know about it so we can do it, and we can deliver the message back. And then the other side of that is, and I'm not certainly justifying it, when you call for the police, you want us to get there as quickly as we can. So we try and we do driver's training for the officers. We expect them to follow the laws. We also expect them to get the calls. So I hear you. We'll work on that.
The unmarked cars. You know, the sirens on the marked vehicles, yes, we hear them a mile away. But these, I know they're doing their job. It's either high risk, drug, murder. It's something, I know it's important, but when it's going through a residential area, especially on the one-way streets, the kids play in the streets all the time. We're in the city.
I hear you. I agree. So we'll address that. We talked a little bit earlier before you got here about some increased enforcement strategies around convenience stores that are selling their things over the counter. I agree with you. It is a problem in some neighborhoods. But Athlone, I urge you about that. So we do have a strategy going forward. If the position stays in the budget to address that. And then this is where I think your other issue was about how people participate in the criminal justice process without the fear of some retaliation. Ronnie Robinson is the major for the area where you're at. We'll probably talk to Ronnie a little bit afterwards, but we will not tolerate it. Just like we won't tolerate people harassing the police officers. If you're working with us, if you're helping in the prosecution of a criminal, there are witness tampering charges that are available to us. There are other things that are available to us. They have to come out. We can't do our job without you, so we have to make sure that you feel comfortable to step forward. But the other side of that is we can't do our job unless you do step forward, and you have to come forward and do that. So Major Robinson is the major over the area. I'd probably get to know him. He's a pretty good guy to get to know.
Thank you.
Again, is there anyone else?
Yes, I have a question. Well, more
First of all,
comment.
will you tell us your
I'm
name?
so sorry. My name is Laura Keys, K-E-Y-S. And the question that I have has more, well, not necessarily a question, but more of a comment. I live in the 21st Ward as well. And my concern is that it appears that the north side of St. Louis or the south side of St. Louis really is not as valued or as much a crucial part of the city of St. Louis as downtown or the central corridor of the city. I'm concerned that over the past year, the presence of the police just driving through my neighborhood has gone away. You know, we could look forward to, you know, always, you know, you come out of your house, you see a police officer driving down the street. That doesn't happen anymore. So that presence is not there. Then on top of that, when you have your parks closed, but then more attention is given to Forest Park, is very concerning. And so the way that people living in the community feel about what the police officer or police department is doing in their neighborhood, it feels like you all are absent. You know, I feel like I want to put your face on a milk carton and say, where are you? I would like to see that presence increased in our community. I'd like to be comfortable in going and walking at my park, as comfortable as the people over at Forest Park or Tower Grove Park or Carondelet Park. You know, I want to feel as valued as anyone else who lives in the city of St. Louis. And my feeling has always been, so go at the north side, so go at the south side, so too will go downtown and the central corridor. This is one city. It should be one city, not divided into quadrants that have value and those that do not have value. So that's my comment.
And I appreciate that, and it is a great question. So I can speak about what the police department has done. If you've heard us talk about redistricting, we redistrict the city on January 27th. When I was fortunate enough to take over this position last year, I saw that there was a disparity in the workload between districts spread throughout the city. So what I wanted to do is make some decisions based on crime, based on calls for service, and then allocate police officers into those neighborhoods on a fair and equitable basis. I didn't look at North St. Louis, I didn't look at South St. Louis, I didn't look at the Central Corridor. I looked at where crimes were occurring, where people were calling for the police, where we needed to, and put the officers into those areas. So on January 27th, when we redistrict, we went from 9 to 6. Each district has the same number of officers, essentially the same number of calls for service, and essentially the same amount of crime. The calls for service are within a percentage point or so of each in each district. So we got the calls for service right. The crime fluctuates, and we're going to wait until the fall to make an assessment about the crime. And we know we've got the same number of officers in each of the 6 districts throughout the city. So I hear you that there's that perception, and I'd really like some help on how to deal with that perception that we police one part differently than the other. We are right now using our hotspot police resources, about 40 officers a day for 3 areas in North St. Louis, because that's where we know the data is telling us where the problems are. That's what we're doing right now. So I hear you, and I think it's a perception problem. if it's a reality, if it's a real problem, I want to figure out how to diagnose it so we know how to address it. But if it's a perception problem, I need to know how to address it as well. Because we police all parts of the city the same. The question about the parks, Forest Park does get different attention. It's been in the paper, it's been in the media.
It's not the same.
But Forest Park also has 13 million people a year visit it. So it requires more attention. It just does. It requires more attention. But the parks outside of Forest Park all are treated similarly. They all get the same attention from the park rangers. We get officers in Fairgrounds and O'Fallon Park, and I was there this Sunday, you were there this Sunday, you saw it this Sunday. The parks in South St. Louis, Carondelet Park, Wilmore Park, get the same type of attention that the parks in North St. Louis get.
But those parks were not closed.
Your park, and your park was closed for Fairground Park, I assume was like that. Fairground Park was closed for traffic one day. The park was open to people to walk in, it was closed. There wasn't a reason to close it this Sunday. Our plan is only to close the park to traffic if it becomes impassable, if it becomes gridlock. And then the plan is 2 cars out, 2 cars in type thing. So you will be able to access O'Fallon Park, Fairground Park, Carondelet Park, Wilmore Park, Francis Park, all the parks equally, unless there's a reason to close it, and the reason would be heavy traffic congestion.
Okay. The other, you were talking about the park being closed, but then I'd heard that at O'Fallon Park, officers were requiring your driver's license as well as your insurance, which is, that's fair. But I feel like it's fair if you do it at all parks. And don't do it at my park, but then at another park, they don't have to do it. Then again, if the officer was taking the driver's license and the insurance card, okay, once I hand it back to you, I still don't know who you are. You know, they're not scanning it, or, you know, it just feels very inequitable. And it should not have happened.
And I hear you about that. Let's talk about the cruising problem, because that O'Fallon Park was a reaction to cruising. Cruising was such a bad problem, and it goes back to the 60s. It goes back before I was born. Cruising has always been a problem in various parts of the city. In 2009, the Board of Aldermen passed a cruising ordinance to try and help us. The neighborhood around O'Fallon Park said, on Sunday afternoons, we can't get into our house. West Florison's backed up. It's a problem. So we started doing that. Residents in the neighborhood knew what we were doing about it, and I talked to them about that. We're now, on Sunday, we have people in the park and are there to step up if something happens, if traffic becomes a problem. But we let the park free flow last Sunday. And so we're going to go forward unless there's some reason with free flowing, unless there's some reason for us to get involved and engage. Cruising being the number one issue. If the park gets so congested you can't move in it, I don't think anybody wants to sit in traffic for an hour as they cruise through the park.
How long were they doing the license?
They had been doing that for years. They had been doing it for years and years. And so we're trying a new approach because, and this is a great conversation and dialogue. I don't know if you knew all the history that went into it and how we got to that point and that the neighborhood supported it, but I also want you to know I'm hearing you and that we need to be able to be flexible and adjust. So we'll try it for a while without doing checks, but we'll have officers in the park, both parks, and if we need to adjust in a month or 2 months, we'll try it again. But I just hope you know that we're trying to do the best job we can with the available information we have at the time. And every time we meet, talk to people, we get new information, and then we can make better informed and better educated decisions. But there was it's kind of close. There was a certain group of people that liked the way we were doing O'Fallon Park and asked us to continue to do it. There are always two sides to a story.
Thank you, Chief. I would encourage you all who, I'm sure all the aldermen know about the particular meetings that take place at the districts. I would encourage all residents to attend those meetings and provide input and discussion with their captains about the particular issues that relate particularly to their neighborhoods. And we'll put something up on the Board of Aldermen's website so all that information is available and people can easily access it. I think that would be in everybody's benefit if we could get more people to attend those, because that would get all the issues out for the neighborhoods about what's going on in their particular area. And it might build some cohesion also between the neighborhood residents about, I'm not the only person out there screaming about this. So again, I'd like to thank everybody who showed up today and provided information. I think it's been very helpful, and we will schedule another one in the future. With that, I call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.